High King on Monday and have a quiz over Taran Wanderer on Monday. We're going to pick up on page 164. Taran has decided he's not going back to Dalbin, Cara Dalbin. After the incident with Craddock, he thinks he's not really worthy to. He thinks he needs to do what Ordu said. He needs to learn to fend for himself. And because he's not worthy, he doesn't think he's ready to also go back to, King Smoit, who's offered him the kingship of Cadafor, etc., etc. So Fluter recommends, go on to the free Kamats. Meet the people there. So Taran agrees to do that. And in making his way there, the first individual he meets is a man named Lanio, page 164. Okay. Taran introduces himself. And notice Lanio says, middle of the page, Lanio, son of Lonwyn. Taran says, hi, my name's Taran. He goes, that's it? Nothing else? Shall I call you Taran, son of nobody? He says, no. Call me a wanderer. Taran Wanderer. All right? So be it. So, they continue talking, 164, top of 165, and Lanio tells Taran that he's cleared a pasture, built a sheepfold, but he doesn't have any sheep. It's like, what? Why would you do that? That was work in vain. Lanio, middle of 165. Was it? Well, if I hadn't, that is, if I hadn't cleared a pasture, built a sheepfold, would you be offering me a fine flock in the first place? And in the second, would I have the place to keep them? He said, but you couldn't have known. That is, you couldn't have known that I would have sheep with me. Ah, look at you. I knew that with any kind of luck, a flock of sheep was bound to come along one day. Like, odds are. Everything else does. Everything else. What does he mean by everything else? That's kind of foreshadowing. That's everything else is everything else that we will see Taran experience with Lanio. Okay? Now honor us by stopping here a while. That is, don't keep wandering. Set for a spell. Our fare can't match our thanks, but we'll feast you as best we can. So, Taran agrees. And Lanio sends one of his daughters off, to find an egg from the hen. And the child does, page 166. Okay? And we're told, Lanio says, an egg it is, finest the brown hen's given us. Look at the size. We'll feast well on this, my friends. So Taran, Lanio, at least one of Lanio's children, and Gurgi, 4 people are going to feast on one egg. At first, Taran saw nothing extraordinary in the egg, which Lanio praised so highly, but caught up by the man's good spirits, Taran, to his own surprise, found himself looking at the egg as though he too had never seen one. Notice that. Has Taran seen eggs before? Yes, of course. He works on a farm. Okay? So why does he look at this egg as if he had never seen one before? It's the influence of Lanio. Okay? Notice, caught up in Lanio's good spirits. In Lanio's hands, the shell seemed to sparkle so brightly, to curve so gracefully and beautifully, that even Gurgi marveled at it. And Taran watched almost with regret as Gawain, however you pronounce your name, cracked such a precious egg into a large earthen bowl. Nevertheless, if Lanio intended sharing it among his numerous family, Taran thought, the fare would indeed be meager. He's got a big family. I don't remember, 6 or 7 kids. I think the 8th one's on the way. But she stirs it, and all the children come in. They're looking in the bowl. And Lanio says, herbs, savory herbs. Chop them up well. And what's this? Handful of flour. So they put some herbs in. They put in a handful of flour. Better and better. We'll need that pot of milk the goat's given us too. Bit of cheese, just the thing. So what's happening? Out of almost nothing, an entire meal is being prepared. Bees, they left us honey, and we're told, top of page 167. So all the stuff's being popped into the bowl. The milk, the cheese, the honey, the herbs, the one egg. And before Taran's eyes, the contents soon filled it nearly to the brim. Even then, his surprise did not end. Goen deftly poured the mixture under a sheet of metal, which, Taran was quite certain, was nothing else but a warrior's shield hammered flat, held it over the glowing embers, and within moments the scent of cooking filled the cottage. Gurgi's mouth watered, and in no time the farm wife drew a dappled golden cake nearly as big as a cartwheel from the fireplace. So, out of these few scraps, essentially, she creates this big loaf. Lanio slices it into pieces, and to Taran's amazement, there was not only enough for all, but some left over. Any parallel in any kind of old story? Kind of like Jesus feeding the 5,000 and then later on feeding the 4,000. Okay, we're not thousands here, but we're also not dealing with 5 loaves and 2 fish. We're dealing with an egg, a bit of cheese, a little bit of milk, some herbs. He ate his fill of the most delicious egg he ever tasted. And not even Gurgi could eat more. Okay? So his first experience with Lanio is more to him than meets the eye. So he goes off to check the fish with Lanio. And they get there, and the weir's empty. And Lanio says, no matter, something will fill them later. So, Taran asks, in response to Lanio saying, sooner or later, whatever you wish comes floating along. Tomorrow, very likely. Taran, how then do you count on baskets and nets, page 169, to bring you what you need? That is, how do you rely on baskets and nets to bring you what you need? Lanio says, that I do. He doesn't respond to the how then. He just says, yes, I do rely on that. My holding is small, that is, the land I own. But notice, he doesn't say own. Hold. The area he holds, which implies not possession, not ownership, but where I live now, okay, is small. I work it as best as I can. For the rest, why, look you. If I know one thing, it's this. Life's a matter of luck. Trust it, and a man's bound to find what he seeks one day or the next. Notice what comes before. A man is bound to find what he seeks one day or the next. Trust. Trust in what? Luck. Life's a matter of luck. If you think it will work out, Lanio is suggesting it will work out. Why? He's suggesting expectations produce results. If you don't think it'll work out, what's going to happen? It won't. Dale Carnegie, famous, seller, called this the power of positive thinking. Is it really a power? Does it actually make things happen? No. But our perceptions do shape our reality. If you wake up in the morning, you think it's going to be a horrible day, guess what? Odds are it's going to be a horrible day. If you wake up feeling wonderful and think it's going to be a wonderful day, odds are you will look at maybe the same things that happened the previous day, that was a quote-unquote horrible day, but because you're looking at it from a different perspective, it doesn't seem as bad. So, Taran says, but what if it takes longer than that? What if it takes longer than a day? What if it never comes? Lanio, if I fret over tomorrow, I have little joy today. Why? When does tomorrow come? It's always tomorrow. It's the nice thing about the future. It's always the future. The future never becomes the present. Why? Only the present is the present. What's Lanio's point? Think about today, not tomorrow. Okay? And Lanio sees something. Taran runs over to him. And what had caused the man's joyful shout was no more than a discarded horse bridle. Okay? A piece of trash, in other words. A piece of junk. Alas, says Taran, there's little use in that. The bit's missing and the rein's worn through. In other words, it can't be used as what? A horse bridle. Lanio, so be it, so be it. That's what small labyrinths brought us today. It will serve one way or another. Okay? So he puts it over his shoulder. And Lanio's eyes are looking everywhere. He cries out again. He looks at the bottom of a gnarled old elm tree. And he sees what? Mushrooms. Pick them. There's supper. Okay? Taran keeps following him. And we're told, the day sped so swiftly, it was nearly over before Taran realized it had begun. This is how Lanio spends his day. Notice he doesn't spend it wondering, how am I going to spend the day? Okay? They keep walking along, and Taran stubs his foot on a stone and says, you're luckier than I am. You found mushrooms. I just have bruised shins. Lanio, no. Come on, look at that. Look at that. Have you ever seen one so shaped, round as a wheel, smooth as an egg? We can use that. Okay? So they cook the mushrooms, and Taran sleeps that night soundly. Next day, 171. If Lanio's weir had yielded little the day before, the night current had more than made up for it. Great sack of wheat had become entangled with a cluster of dead branches. Okay? So, Lanio's wife brings out a large stone quern to grind the grain into meal. Gurgi cries out, oh, tiresome millings, Gurgi's poor fingers. But he takes his turn. Okay? Taran does his. And we're told Taran's heart was easier than it had been since he chose to abandon his quest. Why? He's found his calling in life? No. We're told, 172, he goes off with Lanio, and he finds things and brings them back. And in the beginning, he had seen no value in these odds and ends, like the broken bridle, the round stone. But Lanio found a use for nearly all. Cartwheels turned into a spinning wheel. Parts of the horse bridle made belts for the children. Saddlebag became a pair of boots. Taran shortly realized there was little the family needed that did not, late or soon, appear from nowhere. And there was nothing that was not held to be a treasure. Why? What does Lanio's family practice that Taran is learning to practice that Tolkien talked about in the fairy story essay? recovery. They see every one of these things as something new and wonderful, and something that can be useful for them. Taran tells Gurgi, in a way, Lanio's richer than Lord Gast is or ever will be. Not only that, he's the luckiest man in Prydain. I envy no man's riches, but man, I wish I had his luck. Totally blind to what's happened to him from book 1 through this point. He's had nothing but luck after luck after luck. Okay? Lanio hears that and says, luck? One day, if you're lucky, I'll tell you the secret of it. Okay? And Taran starts to wonder, I wonder if I couldn't serve to grind meal better than the quern. Lanio says, what? Taran finds another stone like the first one. That's a stroke of luck. Because what does he now realize? He has 2 stones. They're both round. They're both flat. Well, you put a bunch of meal on one of the stones, and you roll the other stone around it. What does it do? It grinds it. It separates the chaff from the wheat. Okay. So Taran makes a grindstone. Bottom of 173. The family looks at it, and Lanio says, you've made much from little and done it better than ever I could. Okay? So now they ground the meal. They find a way to sharpen Lanio's tools with the stones. In 174, Taran tells Gurgi, I should be more than happy to dwell here all my life. I've found peace and friendship and a kind of hope. It's eased my heart. But Lanio's way is not mine. What does he mean, Lanio's way? Way usually means path. Comes from the Latin via. Okay? It means road, journey, destination. Destination's at the end of the way. He says, this isn't my way. Something drives me to seek more than what small Auvergne brings. What I seek I do not know, but I know it's not here. Okay? So Taran says, as he gets ready to leave, you never told me the secret of your luck. Lonnie, secret? You haven't guessed it. My luck's no greater than yours or any man's. You need only sharpen your eyes to see your luck when it comes, and sharpen your wits to use what falls into your hands. His whole point is what? It's perspective. You have to learn to see, Taran. Okay? So Taran goes on. He finds the common folk, we're told. Next page, courteous, hospitable. He sees a smith, page 176. And he tells the smith, I am called Taran Wanderer. Notice, he doesn't say, I am Taran Wanderer. Well, he's been called that by one person. Okay? I'm seeking a craft to help me earn my bread. I don't have any gold or silver to pay you. Name any task, I'll do it gladly. And the smith says, go away. I don't have time to teach you. Taran, oh, time? You don't have enough time? I've heard it said a man must be a true master of his craft if you would teach it. What's Taran doing? He's taunting him. Oh, so you must not be a master if you can't really teach the craft. You doubt my skill? In all the free commats, none is greater than Heaven, son of Heros. Okay? So, he and Taran talk a little bit more. And page 177. Taran tries to do something. Heaven says, enough, stop. You know little of the art. But you have the sense of it. That is, you have an idea of it. But do you have the courage to stand up to fire? Notice, he doesn't say stand up to the fire, like the fire of a forge. What's he mean? Do you have the courage to stand up to fire means, do you have the courage to be like the piece of metal that will be put in the fire? Do you have the courage to be forged? To fight hot iron with only hammer and tongs. Taran, teach me the craft. You'll have no need to teach me courage. He says, okay. I'll temper you well in my forge. What do you do when you temper steel or iron? You heat it, you put it on an anvil, you pound it. You cool it, you heat it, pound it, cool it, heat it. And that's how you make that steel hard and unbreakable. What's he just told Taran? I'll make you hard. I'll make you unbreakable. I will temper you. Prove yourself to me, and I'll make a smith of you. Okay? He said, you bore a blade once. Why? Taran has an empty scabbard. He says, okay, you're going to make a sword. Back to the beginning of the first book. It's what Taran was dying to do, and now he's going to be able to. Okay? So, he says, and when you're done, you'll tell me what's harder, smiting or smithing. In other words, killing or creating, hurting or making. Okay? And we're told, top of 178, he thought at first the smith would set him to work shaping one of the many bars already in the forge. Nope. Why start when half the work is done? No. You're going to start from the very beginning. In other words, you don't get to start a 100-meter dash at the 50-meter line. Nope. You got to go back to the beginning. So what did he do? You got to get coal for the furnace. And then you have to shovel in a mountain of stones, blah, 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 blah. And the smith cries out to Taran, life's a forge. Hammer and anvil, too. You'll be roasted, smelted, and pounded. You'll scarce know what's happening to you. But stand boldly to it. Metal's worthless till it's shaped and tempered. Life's a forge. And what are you then, Taran? You're the metal that has to go through that forge and have what happen to you? You'll be hammered, you'll be heated, you'll be shaped, and you'll be tempered. And notice, if that doesn't happen, you'll be worthless. Okay? You have to stand up to it, he says. Okay? So, Taran makes a sword. And it turns out not to be a good sword. It breaks easily. Page 179. Heaven says, did you think to gain a worthy blade at first go? What's that mean? How many of you have attempted something athletically or artistically? Write a song, write a poem, perform some, athletic feat, football, baseball, soccer, track. I used to pole vault. Wasn't very good. Highest I ever got was 12 feet 9 inches. Okay? That's not very good when world record at that point was like 19 and a half feet. I didn't do 12 feet 9 inches on my first time. I think I did like 6 feet. Which is really nothing more than holding high on a pole, running really fast, and kind of jumping with the pole, etc. Okay? His point is, nobody becomes proficient first time out. What do you have to do? Practice. It's hard. It's gut-wrenching. It's back-breaking. It might be mind-numbing. Taran, what must I do? Start anew, that is. Keep going. He labored grimly and doggedly, all the more dejected when heaven ordered him to cast aside 2 new blades, even before they were tempered. Why? They were already flawed. The next blade he shaped seemed to him ugly, dented, scarred. And this too he would have cast aside. And heaven says, no, we can work with this one. Okay? So, Taran goes back to the block, tries his best to break the sword on it. And instead the wood splits. Heaven says, now that's a blade worth bearing. Notice, it's ugly, it's dented, proportions seem wrong. So what needs to happen to the blade now? It's still usable. It'll cut wood. Now it has to be refined. Now it has to be shaped. Okay? And he tells Taran, all right, you stay. I'll teach you. I'll teach you everything I know. Okay? Taran says, you've already taught me a lot. He said, no, come on, stay. You've got the makings of an honest swordsmith, as good as any there is. Taran, thank you, but your craft is not mine. That is, this isn't my way. The spur drove me from small Averin. It drives me now. That is, I don't know what I'm looking for, but I've not found it here. He says, you're well named, Wanderer. So be it. I ask no man to go against his heart. Keep the blade. Yours it is. Okay? And Taran says, it was lucky that I didn't have to make a dozen before this. Have it. Luck? No. More labor than luck. Life's a forge, say I. Face the pounding. Don't fear the proving. What do you do when you prove something? You test it. You make it complete. Don't fear the proving, and you'll stand well against any hammer and anvil. Like war, battle. Okay? So, Taran goes on. So he's met Lanio. Lanio's not a, smith or craftsperson or anything like that. He kind of, takes life as it comes. Then he meets Heaven, the smith. Okay? Life's a forge. Then he meets Dwivak, the weaver woman. Okay? Who says, life's a loom. So she says, Taran Wanderer, huh? Yeah, I guess you've been wandering. Why? Because he's in rags, essentially. More than you've been washing, and that's clear as the warp and weft of my womb. Gurry, yeah, says some things. So Taran notices the loom. He sees all the fabrics hanging on the walls. He says, man, this calls for skills beyond anything I know. How is such work done? She says, watch and see. 183. So he watches her. Thus is it done, Wanderer, as all things are, each in its own way, thread by thread. What does she mean, thread by thread? Now, she means that, first of all, literally in weaving. Okay? But it also means step by step. How do you achieve any task? You do the very first part, and then the next, and then the next, and then the next, etc. Taran, yeah, I would like to learn this craft. Will you teach me? She says, I will. But it's one thing to admire a well-woven bit of cloth, and another to sit yourself before the loom. He says, I don't fear the labor, etc., etc. So she says, okay, so what are you going to begin with? You call yourself Taran Wanderer, Taran Threadbare. What do you want to weave? Cloak? All right. That way you'll gain yourself something, you'll gain something to put on your back. And I'll see what kind of skill you have. So Taran agrees. What do they start with? Thread? Nope. He has to start with the thorns, the cockleburs in the sheep's wool. Should bring back some memories when he last visited the three witches. Okay? He saw one of them pulling out cockleburs, one of them carding the thread, one of them spinning. So she tells him what to do. Comb it, card it carefully. Or, if you don't, when your cloak is done, what? It's going to be all scratchy. It's going to have thorns and such in it. And we're told Taran starts. Middle of the long paragraph on page 184. But what smarted Taran more than the distaff was to learn that Dwivek could work faster, longer, and harder than he himself, even though she was old. Okay? She tells him, the finest wool is useless until it's spun to thread. So you'd best begin learning that as well. So he's learned how to card the wool. Now he has to learn to spin the thread. Gurgi. But spinnings are women's toilings. No. Spinnings are not fitting for bold and clever weaver men. In other words, you do the spinning of the thread, because that's woman's work, and Taran will do the weaving. Indeed. Does she mean, yes, Gurgi, you are right. Thank you for putting me in my place. How dare I think that I should order a man to do... That's not what she means. No. Sit down, learn otherwise. I've heard men complain of doing women's work and women complain of doing man's work. But I've never heard the work complain of who did it so long as it got done. In other words, you need thread. You better make it. So, he learns. 185. So, not until the carding of the wool, the spinning of the thread is done, to Dwivek's satisfaction, does she even take Taran to the weaving room. And so she says, you got to learn how to thread the loom. All things are done step by step and strand by strand. Taran, Hammond the Smith told me life was a forge. And I think I'll be well-tempered before my cloak is finished. She says, life a forge? A loom, rather, where lives and days intertwine. Now, remember the last time Taran was at the witches and he saw the loom and he saw the fabric on it and it looked like some of the figures moved? And wise is he who can learn to see the pattern. But if you want to have a new cloak, better get to work. So she teaches him how the loom works. Taran just doesn't get the knack of it. I mean, he can do it, but it doesn't come easily. In fact, he says, top of 186, it feels heavier than hammer, tongs, and anvil all together. It's not the shuttle that burdens you, she says, but lack of a skill, a heavy burden, Wanderer, that only one thing can lift. He says, what secret is that? Tell me the secret to making, good cloth. Teach it to me now, or my cloak will never be done. Notice the language he puts it in. Now or never. And what does she say? It's patience. It's patience. As for teaching it, I can't teach you patience. It is both the first thing and the last thing you must learn for yourself. Why is it the last thing? Because, quote unquote, once you've learned patience, you still haven't learned it. Once you think you've learned patience, you are still being impatient. What you learn from Laniel? It's partly that patience. Laniel's patient for life to bring what it will bring. Okay? He learns that also through heaven. So he goes back to work. He makes progress. Taran looks at it and says, I don't like this pattern. It doesn't please me. She says, okay. No man put a sword to your throat. Choice of pattern was your own. Taran says, yeah, you're right, it was. But now I would rather have chosen something else. I would rather have chosen a different pattern. She goes, okay. In that case, you've got one of two things to do. Finish the cloak you'll be ill content to wear. That is, finish the coat you won't like, or start over. Okay? So what does he do? He unthreads the loom. He dismantles the fabric. And he starts anew. And he says, this is much better. But I doubt I'll ever be able to wear a cloak again without thinking of every thread. Meaning, he doubts he'll ever be able to wear a cloak. Or, I think we can extrapolate, a shirt, a pair of trousers, etc., without ever thinking of what? The work it went in to making that thing. Okay? So she tells Taran, you could be a good weaver. Enough to make you one of the finest weavers in Prydain. I can keep teaching you. So, he can be a master smith. He can be a master weaver. And Taran says, not sure. And Dwivik says, a young man's way is restless. Yes, a young girl's too. Your face tells me it is not your wish to stay here. He says, as much as I hope to be a swordsmith, I hope to be a weaver. But you're right, it's not the way I would follow. Okay? So she tells him, if life is a loom, the pattern you weave is not so easily unraveled. Why? Cloth on a loom can be what? Removed. Can you remove what you did yesterday? No. And Taran thinks of the three witches, middle of 188, and what of Ordu? But have I indeed chosen my own pattern, or am I no more than a thread on her loom? If that be so, then I fear it's a thread serving little purpose. At any rate, it's a long and tangled one. In other words, Taran is saying, if I am a thread on her loom, he can't make out the pattern. Okay? But heaven and Dwivik both imply what? It's his actions. That what? Are the proving. And it's his actions that create the pattern. So he goes on. And he meets another person. Okay? Anlaw Clay Shaper, the potter. Taran says, 190, I'm called Taran Wanderer. As for losing my way, I can't say that I have. Why? I don't know where my path lies. You can't have lost your way if you don't have a way. You can't be lost if you don't have a destination. Okay? So, Anlaw tells him, page 191, when Taran goes in and sees, his handiwork, I am old at my craft, Wanderer, and no longer sure where the clay ends and Anlaw begins, or in truth, if they're not one and the same. They keep talking, and Anlaw tells him what he does with his pots, sends them to the small kamats where people don't have a potter, and they give him food and stuff in exchange. He says, my joy is in the craft, not the gain. Would all the fortunes in Prydain help my fingers shape a better bowl? Taran said, man, there are some people who would claim work as yours came by enchantment. He goes, yeah, I wish. No, Wanderer. My wheel, alas, is like any other. That is, his wheel is like any other potter's wheel, but also His wheel is like any smith's forge or any weaver's loom. Okay? He says, a lifetime have I striven to discover them, that is, the lost arts of pottery. Again, to guess what might have been their nature. Much have I learned by doing as a child learns to walk. But my steps falter. The deepest lore yet lies beyond my grasp. He's kind of saying, I'm a pretty good potter, but there is so much yet to learn. Okay? Taran says, but you know what you seek. You seek this lost learning, this lost teaching about pottery. I don't know what I seek. I was proud of my work. Hammering, forging, weaving, but neither the anvil nor loom satisfied me. So Anlaw says, what about the potter's wheel? You want to be a potter? Okay. Taran sits down, and we're told, indeed, bottom of 193, between the potter's deft fingers and the clay, he saw no separation, as though Anlaw's hands flowed into the clay and gave it life. His lined face had brightened, the years had fallen away. Taran felt his heart filled with a joy that seemed to reach from the potter to himself, and in that moment understood that he was in the presence of a true master craftsman, greater than any he had ever known. Okay? He has that experience from watching Anlaw. So, Taran says, man, if I could make something like that, it's toil I would welcome. Anlaw says, sit down. Shape the clay. Spoil it you will, surely. I'll just toss it back into the kneading trough. We'll mix another clay. We'll put more out. Taran says, but the skill you already put in will be wasted. No. Craftsmanship isn't like water in an earthen pot to be taken out by the dipper full. No, the more drawn out, the more remains. The heart renews itself, wanderer. Skill grows all the better for it. In other words, he's saying, no, the more you tried, the better you become. The more you have to undo, the better you become. Okay? So, Taran tries. Anlaw says, not bad. In 195, Taran asks, will you teach me your craft? I can teach you only what you can learn. How much that may be, time will tell. If that's your wish, we'll start tomorrow. Okay? Bottom of 195. Let's see here. And top of 196. Taran says, when my hands touched the clay, I knew I would count myself happy to be a potter. More than smithing, more than weaving, it's as though I could speak through my fingers, as though I could give shape to what was in my heart. I understood what Anlaw meant. There's no difference between him and his work. Anlaw puts himself into the clay and makes it live with his own life. That is, it becomes kind of a living aspect of himself. So, Taran stays with Anlaw much longer than he did with Hevid or Dwivak. Okay? But he still doesn't achieve his notion of perfection. Page 198. Taran says, what lacks? I could forge a sword well enough, weave a cloak well enough. But this pottery, which is what I would really love to do, is beyond my reach. Must the one skill I sought above all be denied me? Is the gift forbidden me? How many of you, have something you would really like to be able to do, and yet you can't? You've tried and tried and tried. And it doesn't click. That's his point. Notice, Anlaw did not gainsay him. Anlaw didn't say, oh, come on, Taran, just keep trying. You'll do it. Taran, why is this so? It is a heavy question. Indeed, no man can answer it, Anla says. There are those who have labored all their lives to gain the gift, striving until the end only to find themselves mistaken. Those who had it born in them yet never knew. Those who lost heart too soon, that is, they tried, they failed at first, and they gave up. And those who should never have begun at all. You're lucky, Taran. Why? You've understood this now and not spent your years in vain hope. This much you have learned, and no learning is wasted. But Taran, does that help, Taran? Does that make, oh, okay, I understand now. No, it doesn't. Because he really wanted to be a potter. He thought this was his, oh, let's go ahead and use this word. His calling, his purpose, his way. And it turned out not to be. The ancient Greeks had a word, variously spelled. It comes down to us in this spelling. This word is also related to it. Daemon, diamond, demon, but not the fallen angel kind of idea. Genius or genie, if you want. Okay? This comes from Arabic. That meant every person has one of these. And it's that thing inside us that tells us what we ought to be. Not what we ought to do, but what our purpose is. But it doesn't tell us clearly. It doesn't say, Ashlyn, you are to be. It kind of goes around the edges. It gives little hints, little clues. And it's up to us to figure it out. Well, one person has described it as, it's the thing in an acorn that tells an acorn, you will be a mighty oak. But the acorn never has to think about it. Okay? So, Taran says, what shall I do? And more ways to happiness than making a pot. Okay? So, Taran goes on. He runs into Dorath again. All right? Yeah, we're not going to finish. And he meets Lassar and his son and helps them. They fight off Dorath. I'm skipping a whole bunch there. We get to chapter 21. Page 208. The people of Comet Esau want him to stay. Taran can't. And Anlaw tells him, you save honest folk from their lives. And Taran says at the bottom of that page, Drudwas told me I was no stranger but a friend. For that I'm glad. I only wish I weren't a stranger to myself. What use am I? To myself or anyone? Okay, now, what did Anlaw just tell him? You should be well content. Why? You saved honest folk their lives and homes. Taran, what use am I? Well, he's obviously of use to other people. He means to himself. Anlaw says, the folk of Esau would disagree with you. Taran, when I was a child, I dreamed of adventure, glory, honor, and feats of arms. I think now these things are shadows. Anlaw, if you see them as shadows, then you see them for what they are. Many have pursued honor, and in the pursuit lost more of it than they could ever gain. He goes on, to see them for what they are, perhaps, but he doesn't finish. Common lore tells how one may see himself for what he is, and then he mentions the mirror of Lunet. What's Taran been seeking? Who am I? The three enchantresses tell him, seek out the mirror of Lunet. Anlaw, not knowing Taran is seeking the mirror of Lunit, tells him, you want to see yourself for what you truly are? Taran's like, I forgot all about the mirror. Why? Because he had stopped seeking it. Now, he wants to find it. Okay? We'll stop there. We will pick up with 210, page 210, on Monday. We'll have a quiz over this on Monday, and we'll finish it and start the High King.